Other than wanting to be an Ewok, I wasn't all about being on camera.
By the way, just FYI, please hold that thought. One of the greatest, most underrated character actor studies of all time, the Ewoks.
Thank you. Absolutely. It needs to come back in a major way.
Perfect balance between cute animal, cute pet, and human.
Vicious.
Are you comfortable? Can we get suitably uncomfortable in the most fun way ever? Is this really your karaoke song?
Absolutely. It's so interactive. I mean, case in point.
Can't go through the song without a really bad Violent Femmes impression for at least one verse. I have to hit it. When I'm walking, I strut my stuff, and I'm so strung out. I'm high as a kite, I just might stop to check you out. Let me go on like a blister in the sun. Let me go on. Big hands, I know you're the one. Yay. So good.
Hell yeah.
So good. That moment in karaoke when you realize that you've picked a song because you like it, but you don't have it.
Man, that's the worst.
I did The One I Love by R.E.M. once, and I did not have that. Do you know how high that is?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had, this wasn't very long after I'd started, like, having cocktails, because I was pretty straight edge until my late 20s. So I didn't have any like sense of my my capacity. And after like 2 gin and tonics, I really thought I could go in there and sing "Rolling in the Deep" by Adele, and I really could not.
You know what's funny? I was in a karaoke club late last year, and I got started. And I'm always the one to start it off, and I knocked out a couple of good ones, and then I tried to hit Skyfall, and my wife was like, "Babe." We can tumble. Oh, okay. That's some octave work right there. I'm not prepared.
That's a particularly high one.
I feel like Adele
yeah.
would be the first person to say, "Nah, babe," to both of us.
Oh, she's so funny.
She's the best.
She is so funny.
Oh, my God. You love music, huh?
Yeah, some music.
Best answer to that question ever. It's subjective for me, mainly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Great uniter and great divider.
100%. When was music most important to you as a youth, as somebody when you really leaned in and it helped you carve your identity out? Like, what was that?
Well, I mean, the first album I bought myself was Crazy Sexy Cool by TLC.
Great start.
It was. I mean, it was definitely above what my little, like, 8-9-year-old brain could comprehend with some songs on that album.
Yeah, it's deep.
It's deep. And then also...
it's crazy, sexy, and cool.
Yep. And I remember it almost felt like sneaking around with my friends listening to the Left Eye track where it ends with her flushing the toilet.
Yeah.
We're like, turn it down, Mom and Dad are going to hear.
Well, I wondered about that, actually. I wondered about, like, how open, coming from a place where family is really important and, we have to stick together and we have to work together and there are things that we need to teach each other. But it's go listen to Eminem, totally fine. I sort of wondered, like, where the sort of the capacity for music and culture and if it feels like as a youth you can run around and discover things as well as maintain your own identity,
I think with my parents particularly, because they weren't... They didn't like hawk over me or like make choices for me. I remember when I was young enough, I asked them if God was real, and they asked me what I thought. They had no like agenda. They had
what an
no,
amazing conversation to have with your folks.
Yeah, they're fantastic. My mom's a behaviorist. She's got a specialty in early childhood education. Dad's a blue collar man with a very scholastic mind and launches into a lot of his own studies about things.
So open thinkers, hard workers.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Well said.
Brilliant. Well, listen, it's so nice to meet you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Very sincere from this side of the desk to you, not just on the way it's being, your work is being perceived and rewarded, but just on the work itself.
Thank you.
Just an incredible body of work that you put into just this film, and I know the work you put into getting to this point in your life. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you.
So, these good times that have happened in the last few months, how sticky do you think they are? I remember when I started winning a few awards and stuff for what I used to do, and I'd wake up the next morning, I'd be like, that's a bit empty. Like, I don't really know what that means. I've just got to go to work today and do it again,
Yeah.
How much of it's going to stick around, do you think, and how much do you let it slide off?
I mean, it's kind of a mix. Like, experiences are what stay with me. And even though my suitcase is a little heavier with some of these statues I'm walking around with now, I think what makes it last for me is more the impact that it has had on other people. Like the Globes when, after that I was like, okay, I can just stop now. I can be done now. Because, I mean, the videos I saw it come in of people watching it together, like there was a whole family back on my res that were watching it and just like, Lily won, what? No, shut up, come running from the other room. And then another video of this young Blackfeet family with this little girl that started talking Blackfeet back to me on the screen. And when I was done, she went, sukapi, which means it's good. Like I did a good job.
Wow. You're not going to forget that feeling because it's a feeling and the feeling attaches itself to the memory impulse. And it's like, all right, I'll always have that feeling, right?
Yep. And that's the thing. That's like the win for me is that everybody from my community, Indian country at large, just the excitement from a lot of Indigenous folks worldwide. Because I remember like when Keisha Castle Hughes was nominated for Whale Rider, what that meant to me.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm from New Zealand, so I mean, it resonated through my whole home country. And I mean, there was so much pride in that. And my wife is half Mollie. And I mean, it was a moment.
It was. Yeah. Having that kind of narrative with a young woman leading it, talking about like, just kind of our role shifting as the world changes and like women stepping up. We always have, but just and then like this young girl that just carried it so beautifully, and I felt so represented in that. Even though like I'm not Maori, like it's a very similar experience in that film, and it was such a tender like portrayal of that complicated relationship with her dad, and it's like understanding who her dad was. I could go on and on about it.
Yeah, and also very interesting because to some degree, I'm sure Keisha would acknowledge that she went through somewhat of what a similar experience to what you've been going through, which is this combination of allowing yourself to acknowledge, hopefully, that you've achieved this on your own terms and put the work in, and it's a personal achievement, but at the same time, it means so much to so many other people.
Exactly, and I don't know. I feel like I've been grateful that it's felt so shared because a lot of it can feel kind of heavy. Like carrying first monikers can feel, it's too much pressure, and like I always really fight in any instance in my life where I feel myself being put on a pedestal a bit because it's like nobody should be put on pedestals.
It's also kind of how you're raised, getting back to that house of like, your mom probably understanding that it's not really good for the psychology of people to walk around feeling that way about themselves.
Yeah, it's not good for them. It's not good for anybody around them.
But then again, at the same point, there is a time and a place where acknowledging your growth and where you stand in the moment is really valuable. Yeah,
it is. And not to keep like bringing it back to community, but just
we can talk about community for the whole conversation if you want, because I'm all about that. But yeah, please continue thought.
No, the framework that I like talking about, because it's gaining more traction now, is there's more published about it from our perspective, from Blackfoot perspective. One of the biggest sort of, frameworks that's used in a lot of different disciplines is Maslow's hierarchy of need. And, the pinnacle of that being self-actualization. Like, having the base of the pyramid being just your basic needs, net, community needs, all of that. Mm-hmm. And then with the end-all, be-all being the actualization of the self. But Maslow, later in his life, spent time with Siksika in Canada, with Blackfeet people in Canada, and spent time around our worldview and the way our societies are structured. And from working with Blackfoot people, what he learned from us was that self-actualization is the starting point. Like human beings are born self-actualized, and that's upheld by your community. And I felt that growing up. It's like when you're in a group, you have your elders like talking about you in context of who your family is. It's like, oh, this one comes from a long line of leaders. Introducing you to a group of people immediately who have a sense of yourself in context of your family.
It's a gift.
Yeah. And then when you do have a proclivity for something, when you are good at it, the way people just like kind of fawn over you for it and like tell you you're doing a good job, So you grow up like just communally being encouraged to be exactly who you are.
Oh my gosh, it's kind of at odds with some of the experiences I had as a kid. Not necessarily through the lens of my family, who were very supportive of me, despite the fact that they couldn't agree about anything. But when I went to my own community of peers, it was your absolute atypical John Hughes bullying type environment. And it was like, no, it is like tear each other to shreds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's interesting that, you know, we're supposed to be in a situation where we go to these schools and our parents pay money to go have the highest education, and it's just chaos.
Right.
It's just chaos.
Totally.
No one knows how to act.
I mean, just human nature. Like, we should not be in a pack of kids our own age.
I agree.
It's like we're just meant to rip each other apart.
Our
and tear
identities
each other
aren't
down.
formed, and therefore our job at that moment in time is to take everybody down until we can pick ourselves up.
Yeah.
Starting with our parents.
Yep.
Who are old enough and strong enough to deal with that, but kids can't deal with that.
Right. And I mean, you just know what it is when you have a sense of self. Like, I remember being really drawn to, in any group of people, kids immediately younger than I was, and then kids immediately older than me. And then there's like this level of kind of taking care of each other. I mean, I really like the whole Montessori approach to education because it keeps multiple ages together in a classroom. And the older kids learn better by kind of stewarding and helping the younger kids figure stuff out. And then the younger kids feel a sense of belonging and curiosity.
It's enforced empathy training, really, is what it is.
Absolutely. And that's like, you know, human beings don't have kids in litters. I mean, every once in a while you get these outlying. I mean, bursts of kids,
I know a few couples pop like a box of Pringles. You know, it's like last time I saw you,
falling out,
and now you have a minivan. How's that?
Definitely.
So, as someone who remains with your feet firmly planted on the ground within the community that helped raise you, guide you, nurture you, you go home, you toot your horn, you say, I'm home. What part of wanting to act, wanting to play roles, wanting to lean into art was about escape? Maybe
kind of tied to like the theory behind, I guess, the performance theory embedded in Theater of the Oppressed, Augusto Boal's method. Escaping the world as it is to create a world as you want it to be. Like one example of that recently that I was really excited about in my film Fancy Dance, which Apple just picked up and will be out this year.
I know, we're stoked.
Yeah, me too. It found its perfect home. But in that film, myself and Isabel DeRoy Olsen playing auntie and niece Jax and Roki. Jax is raising Roki with fluent Seneca Cayuga in the home. And there's several scenes where the two of us are speaking fluently in the language together. And that's kind of Erica Tremblay, our director and co-writer of the film, her love letter to her language, because she's putting herself and was putting herself through a language immersion program at Six Nations. She grew up in Oklahoma because one of the tribes that was relocated to Oklahoma, but still a presence in the northeast. But yeah, she went up to Canada to work on the language, and that's kind of where she hatched the story for Fancy Dance. But in reality, there are only 21 or 22 first language Seneca Cayuga speakers left in the world, and they're elders. There are language immersion programs kind of structured in this sort of like self-directed learning Montessori approach. But
can they possibly get to a place where it's understood to a level, and excuse me if this is a naive question, where the elders understand the depth to which the language can go? Can you catch up to that with only 21 left in these programs?
I mean,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the hope. And I think that's a big question of a lot of language vitalization programs, because if you're not raised with it as a first language, retention is a huge issue with it. And I've always, if I hadn't just kind of jumped into being a working actor after college, my other plan was to stay in school, maybe bypass the master's into a PhD study of merging a performance pedagogy with language revitalization. Because the successful method of it, or one of the more successful methods of it, is TPR, total physical response, which is, acting it with your body as you're saying it. So it's like you're
bring it to life.
Yeah. You're just kind of steeped in the word with the action, so the two correlate.
Oh, we don't do that enough. That's so interesting, because the amount of times I think about the amount of words I use in my life, and then I wonder sometimes, like, I'll say one thing, or someone will say one thing to me, and I can tell it carries a meaning that far surpasses everything else I've said for the last 24 hours. And I've got to a point in my life where I'm self-aware enough to know what happened in that moment that made my skin move, or made my eyes water, or something happen.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the additional preparation on top of what you instinctively knew to play this role, Mollie. I love the conversations you've been having recently about the importance of this like immersive language training effectively that you had to do in order to better understand the character.
Yeah.
Because I'd never heard of that as part of a preparation before.
It was kind of not strange because it actually kind of lived in some of the theory that I wanted to explore with a postgraduate degree but hadn't put into practice. So it's kind of remarkable that in spending a lot of time with Osage language, I indeed started finding Mollie in the language. My voice changed speaking it. And I think because my resonance with Osage just moved to a different place in myself, it was a very physical response. And it was very much felt like not me, you know? Maybe me adjacent somehow because, I mean, I'm the instrument that's playing these notes of Mollie.
Yeah, but you disappear in that role. And I was going to save this for later. Great actors disappear when they take on the role.
Thank you.
You just disappear. It's incredible. It's incredible. Like I see, man, I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is another one. I mean, get some meat on the way out. That is not Daniel Day-Lewis.
No, I met him
the butcher.
A few
That
weeks
is the
ago.
butcher.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and you expect him to be that because it's like he's so terrifying in some of his roles that like I've been lightly afraid of him for years, but also just completely blown away by him. But he's the gentlest, kindest, and poshest. You know, not posh because he's very much of the people.
He's
but
posh,
just,
Lily. He's posh.
He's pretty posh.
He speaks pretty posh.
He does speak very posh, but he's very grounded.
Yeah, very grounded. You talked about your answer about escapism through the arts, which I'm a big fan of, and I think music is for me has always been a perfect balance of learning about myself, but also being able to go somewhere else if I need to. Mm-hmm. I thought you gave such a beautiful answer to that of perhaps searching, and I'm going to botch this, but searching, for a world that you wish could be, or a reality that's different to the one that you're in, and then you find yourself in a role that has changed your life and made you very visible and very recognizable and rewarded. That is probably the realest reminder, and kind of the opposite of that almost in a way.
I just kind of take it all to be a testament that people connected with the film the way we were hoping. And I feel like Mollie's the kind of character that the way I was hoping to build playing her, and kind of the way that, she was, the way that she's written, you can revisit this film several times and still see the journey, still feel attached to the journey. And I hope that, I've seen it 3 times, and it's one of the first times I've experienced watching a film that I'm in and maybe having the same feelings towards my character the audience is.
Wild. Like
the sense of protectiveness, this just hanging on, waiting to see her come back, just the comfort that I would feel. And it's kind of what I felt like, honestly, speaking the language, going back to that. It was also kind of physiologically convenient that I figured Mollie was probably left-handed. All of her sisters would cross their blankets this way, but she would cross her blanket that way. So I added that as well. Having the governing hemisphere of my body that I don't use every day be fully hers.
Yeah, which adds to the vulnerability of exactly what you're trying to achieve.
And then having the language, which started kind of shaping a bit of the worldview. For this character, I felt protective of her while I was making it, to the degree that I didn't want to live in her too long as Lily, if that makes sense.
It does, but it's also scary to me for you because Mollie lives a lonely life.
Yeah.
It's lonely. And she's steady losing everyone who's there for her around her.
Mm-hmm.
I just think loneliness is the prevailing sentiment of Mollie within that film. And I wonder whether you felt lonely at times, even though I know that you've got a crew around you and the actors are supportive and Marty's supportive, but they can't be you being Mollie. And
right.
Whether it did feel lonely on set, sometimes playing a character that had to carry so much pain and sadness.
I think when I felt it particularly the most acutely were the scenes after all of the sisters were gone. The loss of Rita was, I wouldn't say any more traumatic than losing her other sisters. Losing Minnie felt like a natural thing because nobody really suspected it was an unnatural thing at that time. there was a lot of assumption that these wasting illnesses, and which had afflicted so many Osage before people kind of caught on to it being the reign of terror, was kind of a byproduct of being relocated. I think also when I felt the most lonely as Mollie was in the presence of Shomika, her priest, when Mollie's sitting there, and the wasting illness is really like, the wasting illness, her being poisoned was really starting to take effect, and just sitting there with her faith, with her rosary, with her priest, and not being able to express what she thought might be going on. And then the getting shutting herself away in that room. I know that Mollie had a life after Ernest and had a life after the Reign of Terror. It was a much different one. But one thing that really struck me that Marianne Bauer, Marty's archivist and co-producer on the film, had dug up was that, I knew that before Mollie had passed away, she was declared competent. She was in charge of her own finances, so there was that. She also, as it turns out, went back after Ernest. And there was a period of time where he was appointed her guardian.
Really?
That's something that I think a lot of people miss when they see the film, especially on a first watch, is how pervasive this guardianship program was over Osage. The first moment we meet Mollie, she's in front of her guardian, just asking for her own money.
Yeah, it's a powerful scene.
Yep, Pitts Beatty was her guardian then. So she'd started with Pitts Beatty, and then, one of the things that was appealing about Ernest, him being, this dumb, good-looking cowboy.
Entirely unlovable from my point of view. There wasn't one thing about him I liked.
I mean,
I get it. He had a cheeky smile and he was quick-witted,
sure.
but
And he was, for her, he was upfront about his own pleasure-seeking hedonism. He was simple, and it was of benefit for Osage people, Osage women, to have a white spouse, because then they could be your guardian. You didn't have to go through the system, going into town, go through Pitts Beatty, right? You could just be like, Ernest, we need this, sign my check. So it was, appealing to her too. It wasn't just like, oh, he's got these pretty blue eyes. It's like he's kind of a simpleton and he'll do what I tell him to do.
But the system, right? The system. I keep saying this to my friends. We have conversations about redistribution of resources, wealth, all these kind of things. I mean, I'll talk about the music industry all the time, and I'm like, it's a psychology you got to change. Yep. You can move the money around all you want.
Fully.
They'll give you more money. They'll never let the psychology go.
Fully. And that's one thing that was so wonderful for me, navigating these moments of, as you said, intense loneliness that Mollie was going through. I had this photo of her as an older woman before she passed away, and she didn't live to be a very old woman. She passed away at 50. But I kept it on the back of my script binder. Like, I had a young picture of her on the front, and I had her at the end on the back. And she just looked so powerful, subdued, but at peace, happy, strong, victorious. And what Marianne had told me that I just loved is that she actually went back in and sued Ernest for mismanagement of her money when he was her guardian. And she got back $14,000, something like that, in money in those days. I don't know what the inflation would be today. Yeah. And then she also, after that, went back after Pitts Beatty too. Wow. Because he'd skimmed some off the top from her money.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think that quiet, simmering power is present from the second we see Mollie on screen. And I think there's some very, very difficult scenes. I mean, one that really affected me and my wife was the scene where Ernest, for the first time really, sounds off on Mollie, I think in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's all that, I'm trying to help you now, or that sort of really, are you?
Yep.
And it's really, really awful. But what's incredible is, and this may cost me my one and only conversation that I ever have with Leo DiCaprio at some point in the future. But it's one of the only times I've ever seen Leo DiCaprio on screen look like he's rehearsing. I'm sorry, he just did. You shut him down so effectively in that moment that I didn't believe that Leo was Ernest in that moment, because you just absorbed all of it in the most remarkable way. I mean, it's a compliment to you, and I'm sure he would accept that, because it's an incredible scene. But I turned to my wife at the end of the film and I said, "Where do you think that rage went?" where did Lily put it at the end of the day? Because you absorbed it. You didn't bounce it back. You took it.
Yeah.
Way more powerful than giving it back. So how
Thank
was
you.
that? Can I ask you how that day was?
That was 2 days. I think it turned out that what we ended up using was our first day, because that was a difficult scene for Leo to crack. I mean, logically, it was hard for him to understand why he was so angry in that moment.
Yeah.
There was also at that point in production, we hadn't fully cracked how complicit he actually was. In the end, you see...
Do you mean no one was entirely sure how far they were going to take Ernest's character into the darkness?
Not at that point. And so there were several times, including that scene, where we shot it different ways because we weren't sure what was going to work on screen with the edit.
Wow.
You can read these historical facts and know what the basic timeline is of things, but how do you flush out the humanity that's happening in the margins?
It's so nuanced, and to be going through and actually, I mean, I love it. I love the idea of creativity in the moment, of being so in the moment, you're not quite sure the character's unveiling itself in real time, but what a play.
Seriously.
It's a Hail Mary scene if that's what you're doing. I mean, it's crazy.
It kind of was. And the only thing that was scripted and the only thing that, Mollie was very stubborn in a lot of ways, the way a lot of Native women are stubborn because we're grounded, we're immovable. And it was so important to me that scene stay that way because it wasn't going to turn into, another, any other sort of Marty spousal fight scene. It wasn't going to go there. Because Mollie's a different woman than you've seen.
She's not hysterical. She's not going to be like, oh my God, Karen!
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
And then the absorption of it, the shutting him out, the shutting down to him. What I ultimately found in that scene, her way of defying, I think, was just the implication that she was too dumb to understand what was going on. And she's like, no, I do understand what's going on. I just don't trust them, but I trust you. And that was kind of the end.
That's the most heartbreaking part of it, is that
sincerely
we're
was
seeing him unfold as you're seeing him unfold, and the fact that you're actually deciding in the moment with a small group of people how real this betrayal is going to be,
right,
just gives you so much to work with, because that sense of trusting him, which we're all on the screen, I mean, I'm kind of figuring it out at this point. I'm like, oh, she's got to see this, but you get to be that person conflicted by that feeling.
Yeah, and when there are seeds of doubt that start taking root, how easy it is to just unsow them. How easy it was for him when he was becoming aware of his own complicity to just kind of continue to go along with it, but not let the implications of what he was doing really sink in. And I feel like ultimately that whole conversation that the film ends up having is that's really how easy it is. What a slippery slope it is to enable these systems is to just keep going along with it.
Yeah. And only when you look back do you realize you were...
Right. Even when it's not in your own self-interest.
Yeah. On both sides too. That's where the sympathy for Ernest comes in at the end, is you realize that he went too far and then realized he couldn't go back.
Right. And didn't really click for him fully until he'd lost someone too. Like for the first time losing his daughter. I remember my mom, she said, I know this is horrible to say, but when you watch him get the news that baby Anna has died and the way that it hits him, she's like, good, finally he feels it. Finally he feels something. That scene that you're talking about were the last little moments before she started getting these injections and before really her subconscious mind got hijacked by being manipulated so much. And the family's pretty much worked out that cocktail she was getting insulin, and she was one of the first 5 people in the world to get it. So it was fully plausible for Mollie in the world. And this was back when insulin was just kind of being tested on people. It had just been developed in Toronto. Mollie was in some ways a bit of a guinea pig, but a wealthy enough guinea pig that she could afford these treatments. But the family, in talking with her grandchildren, have pretty much decided it was a mixture of arsenic and morphine along with it. The arsenic, obviously, to kill her. The morphine to kind of curb the sensation of what the arsenic would be doing, and consequently also addicting her to the whole process. As an actor having to play something, I was playing you find ways to play the arsenic, the neurological damage it does. Like flapping is something a lot of people with arsenic poisoning experience, not being able to hold on to things. The intense sickness just completely erodes your nervous system. But then the morphine, and particularly the morphine addiction, was where I was able to transfer some of that, not lack of suspicion, but that distorted relationship with Ernest onto, because every time he shows up, she gets her hit. Everything feels better.
Otherwise, it's not realistic for us. We're like, otherwise we start to potentially turn a little on Mollie. Like,
Right.
well,
Right. And I think some audiences do have that experience, but there's so much that was just,
wrapped up in it.
yeah.
And also, let's not forget when Niro does the devil.
Yeah.
Niro does the devil.
You feel the temperature change in the room when he's in character, for sure.
For sure, because the devil, the idea of evil incarnate through human form is something that people overplay. It's such a fun character, I'm sure, to play and effective from a role point of view that you sort of overdo it. And what's so good about De Niro doing it is that, he's right in front of you the whole time.
Absolutely. Yep. And, the real Hale, Osage cut him out of photos. Like, for a long time, people wouldn't even talk about him, almost as if you spoke his name and you'd summon him, sort of a thing.
Do you think he knows he's doing the devil's work, or do you think he's doing God's work?
That's the thing. I think that's what makes it so evil, is Hale in this role. I've not seen a character embody manifest destiny so fully.
So fully.
And that's it. It's feeling entitled by God, self-appointing himself king of the Osage Hills, imposing this hierarchy onto Osage people. It wasn't enough to go for oil money, oil wealth, go for indigenous lives. He was also learning the language as he did it.
Because then it's generational wealth. Then you're making money generationally.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. He, in a lot of ways, seemed like he wanted to be Osage.
Yeah, I thought that too. And it's interesting. He does. That's the weirdest thing about his whole entire role in this, is that throughout it, the only thing that's believable is that he genuinely does, somewhere in his heart, have some kind of, I don't know if it's love or if it's just admiration or respect or obsession with the people. Yeah.
And you actually see that globally a lot in nationalism. This weird fetishization of indigeneity. It's somehow this claiming of absolute right to the land.
Is it a savior complex in some respect? Like an extreme version, an obsessive version of a savior complex?
Yeah, a savior complex while also completely absorbing and adopting the romanticized version you have of who these people are for yourself.
Oh, wow. A romanticized version of who these people are for yourself. Complete lack of self-awareness. Full projection.
Yep. I mean, you see it manifest today. I talked about it recently with the Super Bowl last week. There was this, I forget the name of the author, Karl Marx, maybe. He wrote this character, the Apache warrior Winnetou. He's a German author who wrote Winnetou in the late 1800s. And that created this big cultural obsession in Germany over indigenous people, over native people. You see little references of it, I guess most famously now, like in Inglourious Bastards. Like there's a reference to Winnetou in there. Winnetou was Hitler's favorite book. He loved Winnetou. This sort of nationalistic view of the self as being like coming from the land, being the inherent like owners of it. This fantasy of just being this great brave, fighting to keep your land, fighting to keep your culture. It's like that's really appealing to a lot of people with nationalistic sort of proclivity.
Well, it leads to huge levels of unrealistic self-righteousness.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, what can I do with my own psyche? What can I adopt and cherry pick and adorn myself with that gives me absolute impunity to do whatever the fuck I want? And that was very much Hale.
Strange times. Lily, I'm having the best time.
Same thing.
I'm having the best time. I had another Violent Femmes record lined up just in case this was a terrible interview, but I can do away with it. I'm a big fan of letting go. I think I don't know what the meaning of life is beyond love and family. and the sharing and memories. But if I was going to put it in language, I think let go is probably the closest thing I can get to, because that's how we enter this world. We're lucky enough that someone lets go and we arrive. And then if we leave, you got to kind of let go one way or the other. And so I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. We do a lot of good work trying to hold on, but I'm into letting go. So I say that to say that much has been said about this kind of idea, this kind of pivotal moment when you know, feels to me like you're about to just let go. And it's like, hey, I'm cool. Like, I did it. I worked at it. I got myself to a place where I appreciate the craft and the work I did, and I know the craft, but I'm going to go do something else I'm interested in. I'm not throwing in any towel here. I'm just interested in this too.
For sure.
And then life changes and comes back. Is it too simplistic to say that you would let go?
No. I think I've gotten very, very good at letting go.
Yeah.
I think being a career actor means that you have to get good at it or you're just going to go insane. I mean, I'm in my late 30s experiencing this breakthrough.
Thank God, no one knows what to do with it under the age of 25.
I am so grateful for that. I am so grateful for that.
Except for Billie Eilish, respect to her. But everyone else has no idea.
Yeah, Billy's just a spirit.
Yeah, she's
like
just
fully
a spirit,
having a
well
human
raised.
experience.
That all her family have done, and I say this with pure confidence because I know them really well, has guided her natural spirit and wisdom into the world, and done right by her. Yeah.
You can see that. She's a little angel. But yeah, I think letting go of expectation that anything is going to go your way is crucial to have a career as an actor.
Yeah, so when you're being told by people, and I love the story that, you know, and I also love manifestation, but not without work and gratitude, right? And the idea of you know, manifestation isn't just like a one-way road, man. It's there's all sorts of lefts and rights you have to take back and forth. But I love the idea of like, hey, you're most likely to get an Oscar. Okay, cool. I'm young. I have no idea what that means. And then you just begin your journey, and I wonder, and this is hopefully the most trite question I can ask you, but if there were times when during that journey when you loved the work but recognized that the world wasn't necessarily unveiling itself in the way that others had seen you in high school, whether a term like that becomes, whether you look at it and listen to it and feel it differently because you're like, well, yeah, but that's not how it's working.
Yeah, and I think I kind of started out on that foot, honestly. I didn't get cast that much in main stage productions or in stage productions when I was an undergrad, but my classwork was great. Like always getting incredible feedback, loving the scene work I was doing with my classmates, like very much confident that what I was doing was good. But then when it came to casting, it just for some reason wasn't happening.
I think people who want to go, because the idea of being an actor or being in film or TV or theater is so, the idea of pure expression and playing roles is so beautiful. But I always feel for actors in the biggest way. And I'll tell you why, because as someone who has been in love with music my whole life, I know that musicians often feel unheard.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And unseen.
Yep.
You release music into the world and it sits and it has to wait sometimes for a long time before anyone recognizes it. So it feels unseen.
Absolutely.
But actors are seen and rejected.
Right.
That is a whole other muscle you got to grow.
Have And I think you develop a really good sense of self and relationship into the work where gratefully I had enough experience where have been on the other side of the casting table so I could feel what it felt like to love an actor, love their performance, love their talent, but know they weren't right for the role. And that helped me depersonalize it as well. But yeah, I feel like I've always held a little bit of a light grip on it, but love it so much. One of the big reasons I after I graduated, didn't move to LA or New York, because I could kind of feel that if I had tried that young, it would have killed my love for it pretty quickly. I'd already gone through that gamut with ballet, and I really still miss having that form of expression in my life, but it's kind of a brutal one. And it killed my love of movement, or love of dance anyways, when I was pretty young.
Why?
So,
what happened within that experience? Because people talk about dance being such a personal expression. I feel like acting can be, but you work collaboratively.
That's the thing. Dance is incredibly personal, but it can be so competitive in a way that acting isn't even competitive. In a very non-verbal, but very palpable
How dare you pirouette like that at me?
Exactly. And it's just like, I'm just doing me.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Especially like freeform dance or modern, it's still there. I was expecting maybe without the rigidity of ballet training, it would go away, but it almost gets worse.
But you're right. It's like your form of expression is not as good as my form of expression.
Yeah, that's it.
And I don't even feel like music really likes that. I mean, every now and then at a Grammy, someone might go, my album's better than your album. And the fact you won that pisses me right off. But I mean, it's rare that musicians will allow themselves to actually openly at least be competitive about each other's art. Mm-hmm. But you're saying that in dance, you experienced it being quite
as a preteen anyway. And then in a few cases as an adult. Like when you have people that you really can just fluidly move with, there's nothing like it, and it's fantastic. And I do find that rarer when I've gone and ventured into the dance world than when I've acted. Because when you work with an actor that you have that fluidity with, it's just magic, you know? Like you're just gliding through life. I think it's essential as an actor, and this is definitely a Daniel Day-Lewis thing too, who like famously cobbles shoes in between, you know, just find something that he's interested in.
Yeah.
And one of the first lessons I got, I guess, in undergrad was to, from Jillian Campana, one of my first professors, was to just stay invested and stay interested in the world because that makes you interesting.
Curiosity is everything.
Mm-hmm. You got to have something to draw from. You got to have something to be inspired by. I think I don't know what the equivalent would be. Like, you know how boxers get cauliflower ear? I think some actors get some version of cauliflower ear. You can see it. You can see that it's like they've just been taking the same blow over and over without enough breaks.
And also, I think lifestyle plays a role too. And I mean, we're all totally capable of this, but stuff is stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you start getting stuff, then it's like, oh man, I just got to keep the stuff.
Yep.
You know, that role will let me get that stuff.
Yeah, and I've toyed with those thoughts myself. Some auditions you have come in where you have to really ask yourself, okay, it's not about the thought, because a lot of times the first thought is, I'm not right for this role, but I'm still going to submit for it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's like 90% of it, 97% of it. And every once in a while you get that role that comes in that you're like, I might actually get this. And then you think about the implication of what it would have on your life in a bigger way.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about this even in relation to the film because it's so fascinating that as soon as you realize, and I love how the idea of mineral wealth is presented within the nation very quickly. Mm-hmm. We're not sitting there like, what do we do with this money?
One
it's just
generation.
Like, here's the oil, here's the wealth,
Yep.
Let's get this story going.
Yep.
And it's interesting that just like all of us, it was worn, it was driven, and it was owned. Mm-hmm. And I've left that film wondering whether the Osage even had a choice. That's just what money does. It just moves with the system.
You know, you see capital express itself in a very indigenous way when you're around Osage, which was an interesting part of the cultural acclimation coming in from being up north, where we don't have this deeper culture of money. And, I mean, Osage had been trading with the French forever, so there was already a pretty acute understanding of how the white man thought about wealth, which is partly why I think they had the foresight of buying their reservation, because they knew they wouldn't be moved if they bought it, because that's what the white man respected. And then of securing the surface mineral rights, like just knowing that the actual tangible land, and that's a very indigenous worldview, you know, what you can touch, what you can see, what you can interact with. Let's also protect that. We're not just protecting this imaginary boundary. We're protecting the physical, tangible.
God, you think you've done enough at that point, then you realize that, okay, well, let's poison you then.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it's absolutely insane the lengths at which, you know, people will go to acquire.
Sincerely. But what you do see with Osage, and you see it expressed differently there because of this legacy of inheritance, but also there aren't as many Osages you would think today who have head rights. Those head rights are largely with oil corporations, with churches, with banks, because they were used as collateral for loans, with non-Osages who procured them through means like you see in the film. And unfortunately, like, to protect individual identity, you don't know who individually owns Osage head rights. That can't be public knowledge. But when it's like when it's a bank, when it's a church, when it's, you know, then that's
how you know.
Yeah, when you're there, it's well, for example, the dishes in the dinner scene where Mollie is feeding Ernest the first time and giving him his 20 questions and figuring him out. Those are dishes from the Red Corn family that have been in the family since the 1920s and feed everybody every year. So there's not this accumulation of every year, the newest dish set. Here's what we got with our oil wealth that's in the family, and it's stayed in the family every year. And when we were filming with it in the year after, because, holding it for reshoots or whatever, there were a couple of years where the Red Corns rented their dishes for the first time in 100 years for the feeds in the summer. And then, you also see, the finest sort of Pendleton wools and these blankets that people get. When you get gifted it will still have the tag on it, and you keep the tag on it because eventually you're going to re-gift it. So it's the currency of these fine things that are accumulated, they gain wealth the more they're passed around. The more stories they get on them, the more people who have passed hands, the more they're gifted, the more their value goes up. So it's, and you see that worldview with money in a lot of Indigenous folks, Potlatch Society folks from Pacific Northwest. It's displays of wealth are expressed in displays of generosity, not of hoarding. When you're a rich person, you can brag on your wealth by how much you're giving away versus how much you're exactly. And Native people were just like that. You got to be careful around Native people. If you fawn too much over their cool hat and you talk about how much you like their hat, they might just take it off their head and give it to you. It's that's so be warned. I mean, I think
that is the definition of killing with kindness.
Exactly.
I really think it is.
It kind of is.
It kind of is. It's well, if you want it so much, you weirdo, just have it.
Pretty much, but graciously.
Of course.
And then you got to wear it.
No, for sure. Very gracious, but also with beautiful nuances and layers of you're just not there.
Yep.
You're just not there yet.
Yep, exactly.
And I'm fine with this.
Yep,
Maybe
and
I've
caught
there.
myself with that several times with people too, especially coming back in from this world where I'm getting gifted so much stuff.
I'm developing this deep curiosity as I get older in my life, and talking to you it just is so much amazing curiosity, and you apply yourself to the world obviously in a very open way, which I'd imagine, as we established, kept you company and kept you safe and kept you confident and warm in those moments when you had way more curiosity in the business that you were trying to get into. It's that's dealing with some rubbish. So I can imagine that at this point now that, because with a role like this and a performance like this, all of a sudden you have an ability to be able to express your curiosity in the system. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine that must be probably outside of the impact of the film and what it means to the people and to the community and to the people who need to know more, the most rewarding thing is that now you actually, rather than get to run out there and take these roles and get stuff, you get to say, what do I do with this? Is that where you are?
Yeah, pretty much. Because there is an abundance of things coming my way. And I'm definitely not the only person out here doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's also really exciting to see that when you do feel passionate about something, bringing it up now, people are listening in a bigger way. The film itself is such a testament to how much these stories that we've been told for a long time are too niche or too esoteric or whatever that aren't going to appeal universally are doing that. The response that people have had, not just Killers of the Flower Moon, but Res Dogs, it's not a highly awarded show. It's been kind of snubbed by major awards bodies, but it's been the #1 show on a ton of lists. And it's, an absolute testament to how hungry audiences are for our voices, for our storytelling. And I think now that the proof's in the pudding with things like that, with Killers, it makes it kind of a no-brainer that Fancy Dance would land at Apple. That a lot of these stories that maybe we've been pitching in rooms for years and years, now it's oh wait, what was that show? Let's bring that back around.
Well, what's beautiful as well is that you find one person who sees the true value in it and is willing to commit to it.
Yeah, and that's all it takes sometimes.
Martin Scorsese. I mean,
exactly.
We all love the gangster films and we all love the musicals, and I love when he dives into music and works with the band or the Stones. I'm man, no one does music like you, Marty. I've met him. It's okay. I think I can call him Marty. I can call him Marty.
I've been told it's weird not to.
Yeah, exactly. But I truly believe that he is a patron of the untold story. Yeah. And I love that he did this, and I guess a nice way to finish is in the spirit of giving, is to just talk a little bit about what the experience was like with him, and ultimately beyond the result, the film, and how it's changing your life and ours, what you ultimately feel is most special in your experience of working with Martin Scorsese.
I mean, Osage call him Uncle Marty now, if that tells you a little bit. He's the oldest 20-year-old I know. He's got so much energy. He's got so much curiosity. He just he's up and like, all right, new day. What are we doing? What are we doing? Just constantly. And one thing that I really am touched by with him is that you associate these folks who have the kind of name that just gets things made, or the kind of name that just everybody can somehow get behind, like Martin Scorsese. You would assume that there must be some kind of really difficult or unique sort of ego that goes along with that. When you're with him and when you're creating with him, what you see and what's so refreshing is that ego is fully committed to the piece. It's like the self is set aside in service of what the art is.
Worshiping at the altar of the art.
Absolutely. And he does that so clearly, He's so good-natured about, and maybe it's because he's been doing this for his whole life and it's the wisdom that age brings you and experience brings you. He also seems to hold a lot of things with a light hand. He knows when he needs it. He knows most of the time exactly how to get it. He also knows that some scenes that maybe he's not fully aware of how to get, he lets the actors tell him what's going on in the scene, and then he'll kind of start shaping and orchestrating with it. It's truly collaborative in that way. Maybe it is a little bit like a band. He's the maestro, but he definitely plays with who he wants to play with, and he brings on people that he knows will hit certain things.
In my conversation with him, I really felt that. I felt that he moves with the rhythm and dynamic of a musician in a band.
Very much. You can see why a lot of his enduring friendships are with musicians. And, my dad, actually, when we go back to the beginning of the conversation talking about formative music, Robbie Robertson was so formative for me. I was a little dancer still, and I was doing a lot of choreographing my own pieces, and I just loved choreographing to the Red Road Ensemble when Robbie kind of bridged into his music and his identity, and just I loved that album so much. And my dad, I remember it didn't mean a whole lot to me back then because, I wanted to be an actor, but I was thinking stage. Wasn't really into films yet. I liked movies, but it wasn't other than wanting to be an Ewok, I wasn't all about being on camera. So Dad was trying to explain to me who Martin Scorsese was in the context of his friendship with Robbie Robertson.
By the way, just FYI, please hold that thought. One of the greatest, most underrated character actor studies of all time, the Ewoks.
Thank you. Absolutely. It needs to come back in a major way. The world is ready for it.
Perfect balance between cute animal, cute pet, and human, and fish, and vicious, and all of it, right? I mean, my dog is an Ewok. Guys, call my dog an Ewok, literally. It looks like an Ewok. Anyway, sorry, please carry on your thought. So yeah, theater.
Yeah, well, my dad when he was explaining to me who Martin Scorsese was, it was in reference to his friendship with Robbie Robertson. And he said, yeah, Marty makes this movie, and, those kind of movies scared me at that age. But I just remember having this image in my head of him sitting in the basement with Robbie Robertson watching movies together, because my dad told me about that part of their friendship. So I had his name hanging in my head, and then Kundun came out, and that was the first film of his that I saw. I saw it with my dad. I think my dad, the Free Tibet movement really held a special place for my dad. There's so many parallels, post-colonialism. But we watched that together, and that's what defined Marty as a filmmaker for me. And talking about capturing this period of time and seeing a world as it may have been that we can't access anymore, and how touching that was. And then my dad, I had to remind him of this. He'd completely forgotten, but he told me then, partly because of the proximity and friendship to Robbie Robertson, that one day Marty's going to make his Indian movie. and it's going to be like this, talking about Kundun. So when it did come back around, I remember having to kind of like a couple of people who were worried about it being a Goodfellas, being like a murder tour through the Reign of Terror. I was like, but Marty also made Kundun, so it could be.
And Dad
like
said
that.
it's going to be fun.
Yep. Dad was like, it's going to be fire.
How can you not believe in magic? How can people not believe in magic?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, Zane. It's been lovely.